Hi everyone, my name is Imani and I'm here with Mariam, and welcome to the Toddcast, where we bring you unbiased, student-created, politics-based broadcasting made possible by the Schar School of Policy and Government.
On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the future of the Supreme Court.
First, we'd like to talk a little bit more about RGB and her history and the legacy that she has left. On September 18, 2020, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away at 87 years old. Ruth entered Cornell University on a full scholarship, and during her first semester, she met her future husband, Marty Ginsburg, who was also a student at Cornell. The Ginsburgs later moved to Massachusetts, where Martin resumed his studies and Ruth began studying at Harvard Law School. While Ruth completed her coursework and served on the editorial staff of the Harvard Law Review, where she was the first woman to do so, Ruth then completed her legal education at Columbia Law School, serving on the Law Review and graduating in a tie for the first place in her class in 1959. Despite her excellent credentials, she struggled to find employment as a lawyer because of her gender and the fact that she was a mother. At the time, only a very small percentage of lawyers in the United States were women, and only 2 women had ever served as federal judges. However, one of her Columbia law professors advocated on her behalf to offer Ginsburg a clerkship from 1959 to 61. In the 1970s, Ginsburg became professionally involved in the issue of gender equality when she was asked to introduce and moderate a law student panel to discuss the topic of women's liberation. A year later, she published 2 law review articles on the subject and taught a seminar on gender discrimination. As part of the course, Ginsburg partnered with the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, to draft briefs in 2 federal cases. During the remainder of the 1970s, Ginsburg was a leading figure in gender discrimination litigation. In 1972, she became a founding counsel of the ACLU's Women's Rights Project and co-authored a law school casebook on gender discrimination. In the same year, she became the first tenured female faculty member at Columbia Law School. She authored dozens of law review articles and drafted or contributed to many Supreme Court briefs on the issue of gender discrimination. During the decade, she argued before the Supreme Court 6 times, winning 5 cases. In 1980, Democratic U.S. President Jimmy Carter appointed Ginsburg to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in Washington, D.C. While serving as a judge on the D.C. Circuit, Ginsburg developed a reputation as a pragmatic liberal with a keen attention to detail. On June 14, 1993, the Democratic U.S. President Bill Clinton announced his nomination of Ginsburg to the Supreme Court to replace retiring Justice Byron White. Her confirmation hearings were quick and relatively uncontroversial. She was endorsed unanimously by the Senate Judiciary Committee and confirmed by the full Senate on August 3rd by a vote of 96-3. Ginsburg always kept a back-breaking schedule of public appearances both at home and abroad, even after 5 bouts with cancer. During that time, she endured chemotherapy, radiation, and in the last years of her life, terrible pains from shingles that never went away completely. All who knew her admired her grit.
Now we'd like to talk a little bit about the implications of her replacement and the controversy that's surrounding that topic right now. Conservative Republicans have in the past expressed their reluctance to fill a vacancy during an election year. Chief among them is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Graham, who was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, would oversee confirmation hearings, said Saturday that he would support President Trump in, quote, any effort to move forward regarding the recent vacancy created by the passing of Justice Ginsburg. But this is a reversal from his earlier position. Graham had said multiple times that if a vacancy opened up in the run-up to a presidential election, he would hold off on confirmation. He said, quote, I want you to use my words against me. If there is a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make the nomination. He said in 2016, shortly after the death of Justice Antonin Scalia. End quote. You can use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right. Graham repeated this sentiment in October of 2018 in an interview with the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg. He said, quote, if an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait till the next election, end quote. He had also stated on Full Court Press, as reported by The Hill, Merrick Garland is a different situation. You have the president of one party nominating, and you have the Senate in the hands of the other party. A situation where you've got them both would be different. I don't want to speculate, but I think appointing judges is a high priority for me in 2020. He sums up basically his argument for wanting to push through was that the Democrats chose to set in motion rules changes to stack the court at the circuit level, and they chose to try to quote unquote destroy Brett Kavanaugh's life to keep the Supreme Court seat open. And he tweeted this on Sunday saying, "You reap what you sow." McConnell said recently that whoever Trump nominates will get a Senate vote. That would go against Ginsburg's final wishes, and in a statement dictated to her granddaughter just days before her death, Ginsburg argued delaying a vote to fill her seat, saying, quote, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed," she said. This has been a very controversial topic, and this just happened as of the recording of this podcast just a few days ago. And this issue with appointing her new replacement right away with the election so close has made it, started a giant rift between mainly the Democrats and the Republicans, not that there wasn't one already, but it's been a huge problem because in the way that Senator Lindsey Graham has described it, this is sort of somewhat a retaliation for the rule change that happened a few years ago with the court circuits and with the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And in my own personal opinion, that doesn't seem like a good enough reason to completely backtrack on what you had previously stated. I don't think that it's that different when you have, because I feel like his argument was that back at the time you had a Democratic Senate, a Democratic president and a Republican Senate, and this time you have both sort of branches mostly ruled by the Republicans, and so that is somehow a bigger indicator that this is a unanimous decision and an accurate representation of what the American people feel like. But if he's been paying attention at all to the news lately, this is the most divided that I think we've ever been in recent history. And so it's definitely not that different from what was happening in 2016.
I think it's also such a shame that this legend has died, and our first thought, or the main thing that's come out of it, is just more tension between the political parties. I remember when I first heard the news, because I woke up to it, it was the first thing that came up on my feed for news, is the RGB had passed away, and I was so incredibly sad. But literally the next thing I thought about was, oh my goodness, is her seat going to be taken before the elections in November? And so it's disappointing even for me that was my first thought. And so I just it's so sad to think this woman who has had such an incredible life, who has broken down so many barriers and just lived a life for the American people, and just tried to live her life and has tried to present work that she has really believed in and really has tried to push positive change. And it's just really disappointing to see that instead of us being able to mourn her and really just revel in the work that she's done, we're immediately just going into the next, what is the next thing that we can do? And obviously I'm a part of that problem as well. And so I think for me, what I really would have liked to see is just that mourning period, and instead now we just have okay, how can we fill the seat? And it's just so interesting to see how Mitch McConnell especially is trying to compare the Brett Kavanaugh situation to now the open seat of Justice Ginsburg, because I mean, the times aside, Ginsburg was voted in almost unanimously. No one could really find a problem with her, which is part of the greatness of her legacy. But with Brett Kavanaugh, aside from the obvious politics of his just being Republican, there was more that people had to say about his character and his ability to do the work that he was going to be doing. And so I just think comparing Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Ginsburg is like comparing apples and oranges. And so like just to put them in the same league is like how can you do that? um, Especially when you think like we just talked about like the legacy that Ginsburg has left, and so just to put them together, I think is just not giving the fair credit to her. But I mean, it's also like it's the it's what politics is, you know, like we just like you have to move on to the next thing and try and do what you can for your party and for what you think is right. And so it's not, I guess, surprising, but I just like wish it could have gone a different way. But I guess with a timeline in that it's the end of September and that they have until what next just have next month basically to put someone in, I guess there really wasn't the time to do justice to Ginsburg the way maybe I would have wanted or other people would have wanted to.
Yeah, there's also the issue of, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, that at the moment, it's part of the reason why it's really hard for us to be able to grieve this is because for women and for people of color and for LGBTQ people, this is a huge, huge issue where if a conservative judge is appointed, a lot of our rights can be taken away. And a lot of people have sworn up and down that they would repeal Roe versus Wade and they would repeal gay marriage if given the opportunity. And the fact that all of these minorities and disenfranchised groups, their lives are at stake because of just one person passing away, that just shows a flaw in the system that I think people have known about for a long time, but this is really showing us now what's at stake. The stakes are much higher now than they were for Merrick Garland. And this is a much more divisive time than even in 2016. This is, and I've heard it repeated a million times, the most important election that we have right now, and we should be focused on voting, and to add another layer onto that of trying to, like, just a few months away from inauguration, appoint a new justice just because it suits you. Like, if this had been the opposite situation and President Obama had tried to appoint Merrick Garland a couple of months before, not in the final year. I think he was trying to do it 7 months in advance, and Republicans had a hard time with it. If they had maintained that exact same opinion, that's how it would be now. However, because it doesn't suit them, then that's not how it goes. And I mean, I can't even say that if the Democrats were in this position, they wouldn't do the same thing. But as it stands right now, this is, especially according to Lindsey Graham, this is a 180 view from what he had in 2016. And it just shows how people don't really care. They just say whatever they need to say in the moment to justify their argument, but this is not what they really believe. This is just hypocrisy at its finest.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you brought up Obama because the Republicans really blocked him at every single turn that they could find, to block him from putting in that appointment. And I remember at the time not thinking it was that like big of a deal. And I remember especially during the 2016 election when Trump was a nominee. And I remember talking to some people and them saying like, "Oh, I want to vote for Trump because they wanted to see a Republican on the another Republican on the Supreme Court." I remember thinking like, I guess for them that like I guess that made sense in that way. Like if you are a Republican, obviously you want to have a Republican in the Supreme Court because that's a very not semi-permanent, but like long-lasting way to like affect change and like to put a permanence almost for your tenure as president, but also like for your party. And I remember when I heard that then, I didn't really understand the significance, or I did, but like it was kind of just in passing, like, okay, whatever, you're gonna get a Supreme Court seat. But I think throughout President Trump's tenure, what we've seen is like he's really taken advantage of his ability to appoint judges. And so, like, if nothing else, if we look at the way he's been just filling seats with Republicans, it's really interesting because I think more than anything, like whether he gets another 4 years or not, his impact is going to be felt heavily in the courts. And I think we've seen a bit of that just in like the way some states and some courts have been repealing like abortion rights and like different things like that. And I think that's going to be something we're going to continue to see even if Trump doesn't get reelected. And so I think this is just another way that Trump is going to be able to do that. And it's like a really big thing. And I want people to know, like, the reason we're bringing this up is not just because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was just like an icon in her own right, but because the implications of her death are more than just like a monumental figure passing away. It's also like there's like really big and not dire, but like very important implications for our court system and the lasting effects, because like Supreme Court justices, they basically have a lifelong tenure. And so if Republicans are able to put in, if Trump is able to put in another Republican judge in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, like they will have majority, like you were saying, they'll be able to push their more Republican-leaning agendas, and that might not reflect the wants and the needs of the general public. And it's kind of scary because it's not even so much as like, oh, maybe less or more government interference or something like that, or like other things you would say are generally more like Republican-leaning facets of like ideology, but like these are like rights that could be taken away. And so it's like a very serious thing that I think everyone should know about and should think of as like a very serious matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope people take this opportunity to take a look at who they're putting in these opportunities to vote, and how much them not voting can affect other people's lives. And this is not a new topic of conversation. It kind of comes and goes every time that there's an issue with another appointment. Of these appointments, like you said, are lifelong. So the people that are serving as justices with time will not reflect the views of most Americans. And that's a huge issue. And it keeps getting brought up all the time because this, like you said, rights can be taken away from people. And so I really encourage you, if you're listening to this, to do your own research as well. See what these justices have voted on before, and see how it can affect you in your life. And so, with that, uh, let's just to kind of sum up where we think this is going to go. It's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks whether or not the Republicans are going to be able to, or that President Trump will be able to confirm an appointment before November 3rd and before the inauguration in January. And if, again, I encourage you, if you're listening to this, to just keep an eye out and to follow it and to use your voice, use your platform if you have one, to try and make your voice and your opinion heard. And there's no better way to do that than by voting.
And even though like we don't have direct influence, or it might not seem like we have direct influence over Supreme Court justices or like the appointment of judges, we do in some way, because it's the local officials, it's our senators, it's our governors, it's those people who are able to appoint the judges that go through. And so like it may not be direct, but in an indirect way, we do have the ability to decide who is part of the judging landscape of this country. And so it's not just the presidential election that counts. It is. Please go ahead and vote and register to vote for the presidential election. But like for your local elections, please also look out for those, because every vote counts and every election has a deeper impact on our everyday lives than like maybe we think of. But with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. This is a really great discussion. And I hope you guys liked it too. Be sure to comment down below your thoughts on the matter and what you think the implications are for you. And if there's anything interesting or particular that you took out of our conversation.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode. We have new episodes that come out every Monday at 5 p.m. If you're interested in learning how to vote, last week's episode will be up at the end card. There'll be a link to that. It's about mail-in voting. If you missed it, please check it out. And if you're interested in finding more about Schar, please follow us on Instagram at Schar_USO. Also, we have links to everything that we talk about in every episode down in the description. So if you're interested in finding out where we get our information, that'll always be there. But for yourself, if you want to do your own research, you could always take a look at that as well. with that, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mariam, and I'm here with Imani, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.